Hey folks, in today's video, we're going to talk about the difficulties in presenting change to an organization, especially when that organization has a strong bureaucracy. The only constant in life is change, but the bureaucracy wants to put a stop to all that. In fact, you've probably been in that position before where you just don't want things to change. So you work so hard to stop new ideas, even if you're not really intentionally doing it, so that you don't have to go through the struggle of becoming something new. But in an organization, this is actually imperative to its survival. You have to change and adapt with the times. Just think about the companies that have gone before us and fallen. Kodak missed the digital revolution altogether. They filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Nokia failed to see the smart game come onto the market with Steve Jobs bringing on the iPhone and totally failed to keep up with everybody. BlackBerry, do I need to say anything more? Blackberries, they were awesome phones, but they just didn't keep up with the trends and what people actually wanted. And do you remember Radio Shack? Me neither. All of these companies failed to bring change within their organization so they could seek innovation, because change is necessary to innovate and adapt and read what people want and do what they do. If you keep doing the same thing all the time, you're bound to fail, because eventually that strategy is not going to work. So there's two forces at war. There's the force that wants to stay where we are, protect the status quo, never change, don't be uncomfortable. And then there's the other side, the resistance, the people who want to bring that innovation. They want to question things. They want to try new things and experiment a little bit. So in order to avoid becoming a company that fails to change, you need to identify the 4 different types of workers and start to invest in the movements that work. First, we'll cover the 4 different personalities of change, and then we'll talk about some strategies that you can take no matter where you are in the power dynamic to lead innovation in your company. Not everybody's in a position to make changes that will impact the direction of the company. So there's 2 scales we'll look at. The first is the fondness of the status quo, how much you want change to happen or not happen. And the second is the capability of you to actually bring about that change. So the first type is the apathetic worker bee. These are those who really can't make change if they want it, and they're kind of indifferent to the idea that change has to happen. They just want to collect their check and go home, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to recognize that they're not necessarily on one side or another. They're just kind of doing nothing. And maybe by doing nothing, they're actually hurting the progress. Apathetic worker bees won't take on additional challenges that make them uncomfortable. They're just going to kind of glide into wherever they are. So you got to make it easy for them to do that. The second kind is the bureaucrat. The bureaucrat has the capability to make change, but absolutely does not want it. They love the status quo. They don't want to be uncomfortable, and they've probably built up a silo or some level of influence in the company. They control a lot of different things from where they are, and they like it that way. They will actually set up rules and centralize power into their own division to keep it as controlled as possible. So the third type is the change catalyst. These are people who may not have the ability to make change directly, but they want to make change. They're willing, they're good personalities, and they want to see that adaptability come through. Like, they're your power workers, they're ambitious, they're asking a lot of questions, and they're curious. And the last kind is the change champion. These are those who want change to happen and are capable of making it. And obviously they aren't removed from the politics of the organization, but they are one of those people who you really want to latch onto and give as much influence and power to, so they have the correct amount of leeway to bring change to the organization. So now that you've identified who everybody is around you, it's actually time to go about making that change. The only way to get bureaucrats on board with change is for them to convince themselves. You're never going to convince them in an argument. Logic isn't what drives them, it's emotion. They want to protect what they have. So instead of high stakes negotiations, I actually have 3 tactics for you to try out instead. Tactic 1 is to establish a burning urgency or desire to get something done. You have to build that sense of urgency that the company needs to get something done. This is where you latch on to your change champions and you have them drive an agenda for a goal, a very crystal clear goal. With a strong common vision, this transforms your apathetic worker bees potentially into change catalysts and helps your change champions latch onto something and drive, and it makes the bureaucrats look like they're preventing what needs to happen. But be careful, don't replace one status quo with another. Tactic 2 is to restructure your team. Now, the problem with bureaucrats is they have all the centralized power, so if there's any way to divide up that domain, it's beneficial. The goal is to shift power from the bureaucrats to the change champions. This is where you play organizational chess. You have to kind of move change catalysts and change champions around all the bureaucrats and the worker bees to try to build these teams where there's as much power towards the change side and less towards the existing domains of control. Now, you can't go too crazy, because if you upset people, like, they will play the games back and you won't necessarily get the result you want to be. The last thing you want is it working against you. So instead, you want to bring everybody into that common vision and reorganize around that. Tactic number 3 is to transform your specialists into generalists with collaboration. You want people working together, because part of the reason that the status quo exists and grows and becomes strong is because you've got like these very clear silos of people who control this one thing. And as long as they control that, they have all the leverage over the decisions made around that technology or that process or that system. So you want to start to train people in, upskill people so that it's not just captured in that one domain, but you're starting to spread that knowledge all around. And then it becomes more committee-driven decision-making instead of silo-driven decision-making, which helps when you're asking questions, being curious, and trying to bring change into the organization. The next theme about bringing about change is to use data and not emotions to drive your decision-making. A big thing about the way we always do things is it always comes off as we do this because we've always done it. But you have to consider the cost. What's the cost of not changing? And what is the reason that we're still doing that thing? On your team, it begins and ends with a very simple question. Is this practice adding or subtracting value for the goal we have as an organization or a team? Anything that isn't adding value ends up on the cutting room floor and should be completely wiped away from the team. A lot of teams have solutions for problems that don't exist anymore, and those things kind of stick around because we just don't question it and we just do it and we don't think about it. So it's good to kind of bring those to the forefront and ask those questions every once in a while. A good way to do that is to bring in some fresh eyes like an intern or a new hire and invite them to be curious and ask questions. But when you're introducing change, it's important to do that with data and not guesswork or emotions. Bureaucrats are very quick to play the feelings game back on you, so it has to be a very objective discussion. Data will help you determine if your proposal is change for the sake of change or change for the sake of adding value. Don't want you to think that I'm anti-bureaucracy. There's a place for controls, there's a place for rules. This all needs to exist. But if you're not careful, these things will be too suppressive to your innovative abilities as a company and as a team. So it's really important to make sure that you're honest about like where you are in the market and where you want to be and what your goals are, so that you don't get stifled and become the next Kodak, Nokia, Blockbuster, you name it. And instead you're focusing on change and investing in the people who are going to bring you into the next generation of the market. What are your thoughts on organizational change? Leave me a comment below. If you found any of this helpful, leave me a like, subscribe if you want. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next episode.